Thanks, Scott, and welcome everybody today. This is our second to last Rockin' Relationship of the year, and always grateful to be here. And let's get into it. So today we're going to talk about repair, and I want to focus more on what repair is. I want to focus on the general concept because I think how-tos on stuff like this, they're good at a certain point in your recovery to a certain point in your recovery, and that's how all structures and to-do lists work. There comes a time where we outgrow or our needs aren't contained anymore in the structure that we have. So I want to talk overall principles, which I think have a lot more longevity and they can be utilized at any point in recovery. So because the needs of our relationship are always changing, it's important to lock in the principles behind why we do what we do. So first we're going to start with some differentiation. A lot of times repair, restitution, and recognition are used interchangeably. There are three really different phases, and they're all very necessary, I think, to be able to set up to restore trust and to heal wounds. But we're going to focus just on repair. So just real briefly, recognition, I would say, is completely internal. That's an internal process, an internal event. It simply has to do with the lights coming on inside of you in some way about some event or some situation where the lights maybe weren't on before, weren't on as brightly. Recognition can be as simple as, oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't realize that was a thing before. And it can be all the way up, to the magnitude of this recognition carries a powerful emotional shift, a powerful emotional resonance with me, almost on the magnitude of like life-changing spiritual type experience. Restitution is related to giving back what was taken, making up for, in some cases, restoring. So the giving back what was taken, that would be a restoration. Restitution would be, I stole the candy bar and I ate it, so I can't give you the candy bar, but I can give you money to replace it, or I can get you another candy bar to replace it. This also needs to happen. Recognition, I would say, is the first phase of building a relationship after there's been rupture. Restitution, I would say, is the later stage. And repair is what comes in the middle. So to fill this definition out a little bit more, I'm going to talk about how things work in the natural world. So when you look at ecosystems, when you look at organisms, barring any outside influence, things are designed to work. So for example, we have in many different ways in our world, we have systems in place that clean water. So marshes do it, sand does it. The regular water cycle, if unimpeded and not intervened on, it does a decent job at providing clean water. When you get things on top of that, like, sewage or toxic waste or changes to marshes, draining marshes, development or ecosystems that are necessary in cleaning the water, that system doesn't heal itself anymore. Our bodies are largely the same way. Our bodies are set up for growth, for healing as a natural way of being. So, take, for example, scratch your skin, break the skin with a little cut. Immediately your cells will start repairing, the blood will clot, it'll stop the bleeding, and eventually, you may not even be able to see where you cut yourself anymore. Your body does that naturally, unless there's a pathogen that gets in the way. And so instead of healing, there's infection. It's the pathogen that stands in the way. Or let's say that you have a genetic abnormality where your blood doesn't, or genetic anomaly where your blood doesn't clot. That is a change in the design of the system or the functioning of the system from an outside source. But the systems or organic systems that have survived as long as they have have survived because they're designed to heal themselves. So the very beginning of repair simply starts with not getting in the way of those natural healing processes. For a lot of the addicts that I work with, one of the things that gets in the way of the natural healing process for their partner or even for themselves is things like defensiveness and denial. And I'm not referring to those as, hey, this is that thing that you shouldn't do as an addict. I'm referring to it as a interruption of a natural process or an interruption of a psychological, biological process that will happen. Denial affects that process by, let's say you just had another relapse and you're feeling it. I feel so sad. I feel alone. I feel hopeless. Those feelings, if utilized and engaged with, they can be tremendous motivators and tremendous insight generators for what the problem is. Let's say denial comes in and we start saying, well, it wasn't that bad, or it was, just this one time, one relapse in 15 years really isn't a big deal. It interrupts that emotional process and we stop learning. We stop gaining perspective. We may ignore the one-time thing, and 5 and 6 and 7 more things may happen after that. So repair starts when we don't get in the way of healing. With couples, I think the defensiveness plays a really big role here. A lot of partners that I work with, and I'll be the first one to say, not every partner I worked with, and certainly not every partner all the time, expresses their emotions in the best of ways, or even knows how to talk about what they're feeling, because it's so heart-wrenching. They've never been there before. They've never experienced betrayal like that before. A lot of times what I hear partners say and what I watch them do, it's actually an expression of pain, which is an important part of healing. Their addict counterparts, I think, can get in the way of that. Instead of recognizing the feeling that's there and tolerating, allowing the feeling, they may move into a stance of focusing on how that person should feel. Or, do you actually have a right to be as hurt as you are because it was only this? Or, you knew all along? Or, fill in the blank for your favorite form of denial. That can get in the way of that natural healing process. I need to emote. I need to grieve. I need to talk to you about what was lost. I need to talk to you about how I feel. And that all falls under the overall principle for effective repair. That overall principle, I would say, is it's an emotional connection with the damage done. So think about it this way. If you have a little person in your life, a grandchild, niece, nephew, a child, someone that's maybe 8 years old or younger, I want you to imagine in your mind's eye saying something to them along the lines of, well, that was really stupid. Referring to their behavior, referring to something they said. Can you imagine the look on their face that would come if you told them, well, that was really stupid? Now, as you imagine that look on their face, notice what comes up in you immediately. My guess is for most of you, it's probably not this, he'll get over it. That's a secondary reaction. The first thing may be, oh my gosh, those were powerful words. Oh my gosh, I just hurt you in a pretty big way and you showed me. What most of us will do, it's almost as instinctive as looking in the mirror and noticing a smudge on your face. Without thinking about it, you'll look to remove it because something's off there. When we have emotional connection with damage that we've done, pain that we may have been a part of, even just in a tiny way, or even just this person I love is suffering, this person I'm connected to is suffering. When we can emotionally connect with that, I think usually there's some kind of corrective action we're willing to take. It may be I'm sorry, or it may be I didn't mean it like that, let me clarify. There's immediate corrective action that moves the person out of a pain place, or at least lets them know, hey, I don't want you to hurt like this. This is really hard, I think, for people early on in recovery to come by, because addiction is it's a way of distancing from our emotions. It's a way of distancing from relationships. It's also something early on in recovery that I think we can start to experiment with it. I think we can start to get it. even just venturing, like with a sponsor, with a support person, this, telling our story in a 12-step group, for example, and when people say things like, that makes me so sad, or it made me really fearful when you talked about this part, just that, that pinging back, that talking back, here's what I felt. That's how we start to connect with the emotions there. And when we start to guess what our partner or loved one or the person we're in a relationship may be feeling, hey, that looked like that was really painful, was it? 9 times out of 10, I would say that the person that you're taking a guess with, as long as you're doing it with some humility and some genuine desire to connect with that person, they'll correct you if you're wrong, and they'll do it probably in a low way. No, it's not anger. I'm sad. I'm actually sad. This can also be a hard place to go because, again, our own emotions are hard enough to handle, let alone the emotions of another person early in recovery. So I find it can help to do some contextualizing or to do some perspective taking with these big emotions. So imagine someone that you care about now, an important relationship. And again, imagine that registry of pain on their face. Usually what I'll see couples do is they'll get into an argument of, you said this, therefore I feel this way. And it becomes an argument about, are you going to take 100% ownership? I actually don't think 100% ownership is necessary for effective repair to happen, or at least for effective repair to start. You might start with, if what I'm seeing on my partner is due in any way to some small action that I've taken, what would I want to do with that? So in other words, when I see my partner in pain, if there is any way that I've contributed to that, what would I do? So let's say, for example, your partner comes home from a long day of work and their fuse is short, and when you say, what do we want to do for dinner, they snap. And they launch into, you're always waiting for me, you're always, why can't you take care of yourself? Why can't you do something for us? Why can't you decide? On and on and on. And as you're talking, you find out that they had a day full of demands that they couldn't meet at work. They had a day full of people upset with them. And to then come home and one more decision they have to make, one more way they don't feel supported. It's not that you caused all of those feelings, but you did misread, or you did misstep in the beginning. If you can own just a small part of what might have contributed to your partner feeling the way they would, you'll probably, or you have the opportunity to take a compassionate stance with them. I didn't realize today was so stressful. I'm so sorry for putting that on you. I didn't recognize it. I don't want to put you in a position where I'm one more point of stress for you. Let's approach this differently. But again, that all comes under that umbrella. The principle that drives effective repair is emotional connection with damage that you've done or may have done. I guess to put a finer point on it, it's emotional connection with the pain that your partner's in. It's not just, this is your pain. Good luck with that. It's, this is your pain and I'm here. What can I do? So that is the topic for today.
So it sounds like you didn't use the word empathy there, but with the whole contextualization discussion. But I mean, it seems like empathy kind of plays into that, like recognizing that you're in pain and finding out, what I can do, not necessarily feeling it with you, but at least recognizing it and, do I have a part and what can I do about it?
Yeah, I'd say empathy is definitely the established term to describe that. One of the reasons why I didn't go with empathy is because I didn't use that word, I think at all, because a lot of the folks that I work with, the addicts early in recovery, empathy is like saying to them, speak 3 different languages tomorrow. And it really is, there's a lot to learn about empathy, and I think a lot to practice with that in recovery. But it's not as insurmountable a task as it might feel at the beginning. So I wanted to break it down into that really concrete, simple principle. Can you connect emotionally with what is going on with your partner right now? Can you show through your emotions that you understand what your partner's going through?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. ask questions using the Q&A feature about today's topic, which is repair, or anything else that is happening in your life and your relationship. And we'll jump to the first one here real quick. Please, can you explain what it means when someone is denying reality? How does this look and how does it work? I don't understand. How can this manifest? Is it a defense mechanism? Is it a defense mechanism?
Yeah, I'll start with the defense mechanism part of the question. Defense mechanism is a broad term for anything we do either interpersonally or internally. So in our relationships or in our own thoughts, it's anything we do to distance from uncomfortable feelings or uncomfortable reality. So defense mechanisms can take a lot of forms. My personal favorite one is to make a joke out of anything uncomfortable that I'm facing. Some people might create an uproar or a distraction to deflect from uncomfortable feelings or to prevent themselves from feeling the uncomfortable feelings. So denial fits in that umbrella. What denial is, it's a oftentimes unconscious twisting, bending, reshaping of reality. There are several forms of denial that we can undertake. There's there's minimizing, there's playing the victim, there's flat out denial. I didn't do that. That wasn't me. These are all different ways that we arrange our story about the event that lessen its impact on us. By definition, when we do that, it means that we're not in reality. We're crafting our own narrative, usually one that's more comfortable for us, or at least that we feel more competent in than the reality. So where I see this come up with a lot of couples, I was just meeting with one this morning, a heterosexual couple. He betrayed her through some affairs and lots of porn use and general sex and porn addiction stuff. And she was saying this morning, every time you're on your phone, I'm wondering who you're looking at and thinking that they're more attractive than me. And his gut response, I couldn't stop him fast enough, was porn wasn't even that much of the problem. It was more me having affairs. And there's a part of me that's sitting back and is like, good move, man, good move. Like point her to more of the pain. But the denial mechanism there is a minimization of what she was saying. Is it doesn't matter how much you've used porn. This rocks me every time I see you on your phone. This is hard for me. I wonder where your mind is. I wonder where your heart is. Are you actively betraying me again? And the denial mechanism there was to turn it from that difficult emotion, I'm hurting because of action you took, to, well, the action wasn't that bad. It was a minimizing, it was an intellectualizing. And denial, it's a problem when we keep it internal, definitely, when we can't, come to grips with reality. It's definitely a problem when we make it external, we try to convince others of our reality. This is where a lot of the work I do with couples is, let's not get into the storyline of what happened or didn't happen, because ultimately in this moment, that doesn't help us. What we want to get into right now is, how is the person across from you feeling and what can you do about it? What are you willing to do about it? Oftentimes, when I see that kind of connection with reality, the feeling again, especially when it's with somebody that you care about, if you can really resonate, gosh, I've really hurt you. I haven't been there for you. I can see now how much you need me. Even with some of the most hardened guys that I work with, I'll see them reach out quite empathetically and tenderly once they can connect with the reality of that feeling.
Yeah, type some more questions in for us, please, into the Q&A. Dr. Rob says that denial is an acronym for don't even know I'm lying. Now, those of you who are keeping up will understand that the word no in this context starts with a K, not an N. So it's not a very good acronym, but don't even know I'm lying is a pretty good explanation of what denial is. I describe it when I'm writing about it as a series of internal lies that manifests externally. So it starts inside. I'm lying to myself first because I need to justify, as an addict, I need to justify my behavior. I'm cheating on my wife, my relationship, whatever. I need to justify that. I'll minimize it. I'll rationalize it. I'll intellectualize it. I'll blame. That's a big one. Well, if she didn't do this or hadn't done that, I wouldn't feel the need to do this. But the lies start inside. I have to justify it to myself. And the sad thing about addiction is we start to believe our own BS. We start to, we tell ourselves these lies often enough and loudly enough that we start to believe them. And then we expect you to believe them. And we can get really strident with that, which can take us into basically gaslighting, where we're trying to manipulate your perception of reality. So not only are we in denial ourselves, we're expecting you or trying to drag you into being in denial with this. I think the technical term is pas d'adou or something like that. I don't know. But can you talk a little bit, John, while we wait for more questions, about gaslighting and how sometimes these really intelligent betrayed partners you would think would never get sucked into this complete insanity do?
Yeah, so gaslighting, I think, as far as it relates to denial, I think it's a much more serious form, and it's definitely an escalated form, because when gaslighting happens, there is no part of the person who's gaslighting, the manipulator there is no part of them that doesn't know what the reality is. So it's a very active, intentional alteration of reality. In its pure definition, the original definition was literally making somebody think that they're crazy when they're not. And it came from a play where this guy had caught his wife in infidelity, and rather than confront her, over time he gradually turned down the level of the gaslights in their house and pretended like everything was normal. So she was saying, is it getting darker? No, it's not getting darker in here. And eventually the house is pitch black and he's seemingly functioning just normal, and she goes insane. So it's really this intentional, not just I'll throw you off the scent, it's I will feed you a completely BS reality because that's where I want you. That's what I want you to believe, not the truth about what's happening. So, gaslighting, I think, is particularly damaging for partners and damaging for relationships because it takes the relationship and the partnership out of this collaborative realm. We both have a perspective, and we both have truth that we're seeing here. Let's come together and decide how we want to merge ours to one person takes control and one person decides what the truth and the narrative is. And they can, utilize force, threats, manipulation, coercion to get the other person on board. It's very psychologically damaging.
Yeah, I mean, gaslighting, it's intentional. It's denial on steroids. It's a form of abuse. I mean, it's really psychologically abusive. So yeah. Okay, we got to keep typing the questions in. We'll get to them. Any advice for betrayed partners who constantly try to connect emotionally and empathetically toward the betraying spouse, but are constantly met with blame, minimizing, gaslighting, etc.? So.
Yeah, there's lots of routes you can go on this. I'm going to talk about, I guess, some relationship supportive ones, and take that into consideration when I say relationship supportive. It of course is an option, and I think the first options you need to visit are, what do I need in this situation? I think it's nigh impossible to turn off your heart and compassion to somebody that you love, and I certainly wouldn't recommend that. But a first stop in considering what to do is, what's the toll that it takes on you to continue to give a gift that not only is not received, but that is, met with escalation and anger and blame, minimizing, gaslighting, etc. But some relationship positive places to go. If your partner is in recovery and getting support, I think it's always fair game to say, hey, I've noticed when I talk to you about XYZ, that tends to make you angry. I experience a lot of minimizing. I experience some crazy making. Would you be willing to talk with your sponsor? Would you be willing to talk with your therapist about that? Just real simple. Instead of making it a you and I are going to hash this out, it's, hey, I'm experiencing this and I need you to be a little more aware of that. I'd like you to be a little more curious about that. Could you work on that? That I would say is probably maybe one of the most effective things that can be done. It kind of takes you out of the middle, kind of takes you out of that role of enforcer. If you have a partner who is, willing but maybe unable, I'd really like to be there for you, but defensiveness is so entrenched. I think asking something like, hey, I've noticed when I talk to you about XYZ, it tends to make you pretty angry, pretty upset, pretty defensive. It makes it hard to talk to you. Would you be open at some point hearing my experience on that? Would you be open at some point me telling you how I feel when that happens? And I put into some point there because if somebody's on the heels of blame and minimizing and gaslighting, they're probably not ready to listen right then. But sometimes, again, depending on where your partner's at in their recovery and their emotional development, an invitation to later on come to the table and listen, they might have more luck with that when it's not in the moment. Because a lot of the anger and the minimizing, the gaslighting, it becomes this survival mechanism. So you put me in a situation where I feel like my back's against the wall, I'm going to use those tools because they're what I think is most effective. So a conversation or help getting around those tools is they've got to be in a different place to approach it. They've got to be in a different place where they could say, yeah, I could listen openly. I'll take notes. You won't get a response from me. I won't tell you what I think, but I'll just collect what you're saying here. Those would be two, or I guess three suggestions for where you might go with that.
Thank you. When does a partner start to feel affectionate toward their sex addicted spouse again? It's hard to have hope of the future when the feelings of affection and intimacy have been damaged so badly. I love these when questions because
right.
There's no answer.
The first thought that came to my mind is, well, I know some people where that very night of disclosure was, one of the most intense, there was lots of crying together, holding sex, like whatever. Some people it's immediate. I would say long term, you're right on the money here that affection place gets harder and harder to go to as we get further and further away from D-Day if it didn't hit you all at once on D-Day. So as far as time goes, I don't know how long it takes. Some things that I've noticed with partners when they feel it again, when they see their addicted partner being able to yield a little bit more. So I'm thinking of one particular couple that I work with. It was just when he could start to recognize, and the term that he used for it is, he said, I've been a real jerk to you. It wasn't even acknowledging addiction or betrayal, but I've treated you badly. When he could go back to that again and again, when he could see that pain register on her face, I'm so sorry, I have a pattern of treating you badly. Let me try to make this right. Her affection and willingness to kind of move in close, it grew in conjunction with how open he became and how willing to yield and own harm that he had done. For others, that ability to feel affectionate again, it might be related more to forgiveness than necessarily where the addict's at. I have worked with some couples long-term where he's continued to struggle with sobriety, but is open and honest, and she's worked a process of her own. And the decision that they made was to get into a place of, we're going to be supportive of each other, and this is how we do it. And essentially that partner had to decide to let go of anger that they had a right to feel. And that was the right decision for them. It's not, certainly not where I'd recommend starting for everybody or a solution for everybody, but there's lots of different ways that can look.
I know a number of couples who do like a nightly check-in where they take turns. This is the best thing that happened today. This is the most difficult thing that happened today. This is my emotion at this moment. Are there check-ins that people can do, on a regular basis that kind of help rebuild the emotional intimacy and connection?
Yeah. I've heard it said a lot over the past few years. It's hard to hate up close. So those check-ins that I think facilitate that kind of intimacy, that kind of closeness, that kind of affection, they're not just focused on how did you do today, are you sober or not, but they really focus on kind of the internal world. And there's several different formats I like for that. There's one from Recovering Couples Anonymous where you essentially take an inventory each day with one another. The gifts you gave me today were, and how I may have made things more difficult was. So it's a recognition of gifts given and a recognition of how we might have gotten in the way of peace and harmony in the relationship. I've seen that one with, in the right circumstances, the right timing. I've seen that one really, breed a lot of affection. Talking vulnerably about emotions and thoughts. A lot of addicts will be prone to kind of wall off and disengage when they're scared. But when they can come to a partner with, hey, it just scares me to death to think about XYZ, when that's genuine and that's real and there's no, pretense manipulation in it, I see a lot of affection grow in conversations like that. Even partners saying to their addicted partner, it scares me to think that your recovery is, hanging by a thread. Help me out here. That can be met with a lot of affection too. So I think vulnerability often opens the door to affection, especially when it's mutual. We're both willing to take a risk and kind of show our bellies here.
Do couples need to kind of set to really have a structure or set some boundaries around this so it doesn't kind of run off the rails? Because I'm scared that your recovery is hanging by a thread. I can hear the defensiveness and the denial popping up like boom.
Yeah. So some of the parameters are helpful with these check-ins. Is there's a set speaker and listener. It's not a conversation. It's a check-in. I'm letting you know where I am. Do what you will with it. These are also not lengthy conversations. When I work with couples, I say check-in shouldn't be any longer than 5 minutes where both of you take a turn. It's really not it's not analysis like you're laying on the couch and you talk for an hour about whatever's on your mind. It's you get right to the point. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm needing, whatever your check-in structure is. And then it always has to end with a recognition of effort made. Thanks for taking this time with me. And usually having some buffer time afterward can help to kind of separate so that we don't just dive into issues and we turn check-in into, this is where I get all my ammunition to talk about the things that are really difficult for us. It's really just the purpose of, I heard you, I'm here.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it helps couples to remember that they're really on the same team and they're fighting for the same goal. And that can stop them from getting mad at each other and start getting mad at the addiction and working to save the relationship. The touchdown is to save the relationship, not to win the argument. The betraying partner will not respect any sort of boundaries, is angry and creating an unhealthy environment for the children by yelling, calling the betrayed spouse names, etc. I filed for divorce and in order for him to leave so I could bring the children home. He's angry and blaming me. I feel I did the right thing. Any advice or support you can offer for holding and enforcing such a strong boundary?
First of all, I'm so sorry it came to that. That couldn't have been an easy decision, and I'm sure it's not easy to follow through on it at all. Couple ideas come to mind. The first one is your social support will make a big difference in this, especially if that social support is people who have been in the same position that you've been in. So 12-step groups, the drop-in support groups here on sex and relationship healing. People who have been through the same thing will be less likely to give you advice and to judge, and more likely to just sit with you in the decision that you've made and help support your ability to make your decisions. The other part of this, and this comes from, it was probably some of the best relationship or getting out of bad relationship advice that I was given and I followed. I talked to a support person about a particular relationship difficulty, and I said, I think I need to leave. And he said, you think you need to leave, or you're going to leave? And I said, I'm going to leave. And he said, all right, two things that you need to do. You need to start keeping a list of red flags, and you need to start keeping a list of inconsistencies, because there will come days where it feels like this is workable. We can do this. Oh, it's changed. And it wasn't in the spirit of convincing myself that this was an awful person or that I was in a bad situation. Um, because the support person knows me pretty well, and I tend to give the benefit of the doubt freely. And I really needed that other part of me that reminded me why I was making the choice that I was making. Um, and that really helped to get clear on why the boundary was necessary, and it helping to know what to watch for. When I saw especially the inconsistency list on those days where I was like, oh, maybe this could work, and I was still seeing the same inconsistencies that 3 days before I was writing, saying this is actually very concerning to me. It helped to give me perspective, and it helped to ground me. So if that is the decision that you've made and you're committed to following through on it, some work like that can really help to stay clear on why the boundary exists. A lot of times we get hyper focused on what the boundary is, and when we do that, just like we're talking about with repair, we can get hyper focused on what this is and how to do it versus why am I doing this. When you can keep in touch with why you're doing this, your actions will be a little more adaptive and flexible, which is actually, I think, a huge part of keeping good boundaries, not just setting up the wall and saying it can't move, but it's more like a boundary you get to carry with you and apply it to all the situations you need to.
Yeah, like John, I'm sorry that it came to this, but I really applaud you for recognizing that this is unhealthy not only for you but for your kids, and doing something about that. John, what should the kids know at this point? What should they be told? What kind of support should they get to help the kids not internalize blame for what's happening? Because I think we all know that kids, it's all about them, and they will internalize the blame depending on their age.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, here's my bias, not as a therapist, but as a parent. I think regardless of the level of information your kids have,
the
um,
kids are 4 and under 1, so they're very young.
okay, so some kind of therapeutic support can be helpful with the baby. That, of course, is really hard, but 4-year-olds can engage in, helpful therapy. And so I think getting your 4-year-old a qualified child therapist. Because what I find with kids is they often soak up a lot more than we're aware of, and they don't know how to express it. Especially a 4-year-old, they're not going to have the verbal acuity to talk about, hey, this is what I'm feeling, but they will show it if given the opportunity. So that is a good place to go at that age level. Explaining why dad doesn't live at the house anymore. Um, don't go into the whole history. I would advise strongly against that, because little kids, the concept of sex is already, way too big for them to get at that age completely. And then couple that with addiction, that's way too much. I think just simply, dad has done some things that have hurt mom, and we're taking a time out right now. Or dad has done some things that hurt mom, and our relationship can't continue the way that it is. So we're going to be living in different houses. We won't be married anymore. Um, I think also a lot of times parents in those situations, they'll give too much information out of their anxiety, or they'll get a lot of information out of their anxiety. See if you can, find out from your child, how are you feeling about this? What's going on for you? Start where they're at, and give that kind of support. This, with a divorce, especially at an early age, it will be a lifelong conversation you have with your kid, because at different stages in their development, different stages in their life, they're going to be wondering what happened to my mom and dad. And at different parts of their life, it'll look different. So also work on your ability to kind of connect with that and be there in a way that is supportive for your child at the time.
And if you've got older kids like teenagers, I think that there can be a real temptation to lean on the older kids for support, which is exactly what should not happen because they will resent that in somewhere. I mean, have you seen that happen, John?
Oh, absolutely. That kind of, I'd call it like emotional surrogacy,
Yeah.
where a child kind of takes on the emotional role of a parent. It's a bad idea for a couple of reasons. First of all, it puts the kid in a place of responsibility where they don't have any power, and that, that's a really difficult psychological place to be. It also can make that kid feel like they have to feel a certain way about their other parent. It can put them in the middle. It will lead to resentment because it also gets right in the middle of that kid's own grief process, and they need to be able to grieve. Um, so that's where in your work with your support group and your therapist, make sure that you're really accountable about your boundaries with your children, what you're sharing, how you're talking. You're going to need to increase your own social support because it will take a village just for you. So increase your own social support so that when you do come into that parenting space, you get to be focused on their needs. Joseph Campbell, one of my favorite quotes from him, said, "The minute that life is conceived, those who conceived it start sacrificing their own lives to protect this new life." Um, it's one of my least favorite and most favorite parts of parenting. But that's really, I think, the key focus here is there's somebody who had zero say in this and zero say in what happens next. You as the betrayed partner, you didn't have 100% say about what happened or any say about what happened, but you do have say about what happens next. So remembering that your kids they're really at the mercy of you and your spouse's decisions, and that's not pressure to make the right decision because there isn't one, but just remember they're going to have a process of their own, and you can do a lot of good in learning how to support them in their process while you get supported in yours.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, and I think Ken Adams uses language in his writing about mother enmeshed men and covert incest and emotional incest about this occurs when the child suddenly exists to meet the emotional needs of the parent instead of
Yeah.
vice versa. I've paraphrased badly, but that's kind of the general idea. I mean, as you said, as a parent, you're the one who's meeting the child's needs, and if that dynamic gets flipped, it causes real long-term problems for the child.
And it's ultimately harmful to your relationship with the child. It may feel in the moment, hey, we're pulling together, we're so close. Um, Down the road, there will be anger and there will be a rift. Um,
Yeah. So, is a coping mechanism the same as a defense mechanism?
I would put I would put defense mechanism under the umbrella of coping mechanism, because what coping mechanism is I would say that's a neutral term to describe anything that we do in response to changes in our environment or needs. So coping mechanisms can be proactive and healthy and engaging, like when I'm down or upset, I pick up the phone and I call some support people and I talk through it. It can be, one of my favorite things that I've heard Bessel van der Kolk say: if you want your mind to focus, you have to move your body. So learning how to do movement with your body to keep your mind focusing, that's a coping mechanism. Defenses are also a coping mechanism. They're ways that we respond or ways that we've learned to respond. And I would say effectively, at least in the short term, to stressors. So defense mechanisms are a specialized type of coping that has to do with distorting reality so that we don't feel the full blow of it.
And from the addict standpoint, I can, reach out in healthy ways as a coping mechanism. I'm having a bad day, so I call John and say, hey, John, I'm having a bad day. Can I just vent for a little while? Or, I can reach for a pint of Ben and Jerry's and gobble that down, or I can go to porn and masturbate and engage in my addiction. And then I'll use some defense mechanisms around my addiction to justify it.
Yeah.
So it's part of my addictions are maladaptive coping mechanisms. They're coping mechanisms that don't serve us in the long run. They work in the short run, but over time they create problems. That's what an addiction is. It's a coping mechanism gone awry. It runs off the rails. It takes over your life, and you can't stop it. despite the consequences, et cetera, et cetera. You wanted to jump in, John. I saw you.
I was going to say, just as a general rule of thumb, if you're having a hard time deciding would this be positive coping or not so helpful coping, I find generally things that open the system up when coping. I'm open to people. I'm open to ideas. I'm open to feedback. I'll take information that's not just me. Those tend to be, I think, a little more useful. The unhealthy coping mechanisms are the things that close the system down. So when I isolate, when I use addiction, um, when as far as I go for solace is a pint of Ben and Jerry's instead of a pint of Ben and Jerry's over the phone with somebody who's walking me through, like, things that close the system down, I think tend to be a little more maladaptive. Because remember, human beings are designed to do best in relationships and herds. So when we take ourselves out of that, we're really, I think, setting ourselves up for a tough slog.
And even there are coping mechanisms, mindfulness exercises. What are 5 things I see? What are the 4 things I smell? 3 things I touch, 2 things I taste, and 1 thing, whatever, the hear or whatever. Just exercise all 5 senses. It brings the world in, even if I'm not talking to somebody on the phone or in person. And even just breath work, just paying attention to my body sort of opens me up to more than is what's going on right now. But bringing in other people, we do better when we're a part of than when we're apart from.
Yep.
So, what do you do when you and your partner are not in agreement with where they are at with their recovery process? So he thinks he's well, you think he's not.
My first response to that is how awesome you have 2 people on the team looking at very different parts of this. A lot of the times I'll find that the reasons why addicts in recovery think they're doing well, they can be valid. A lot of times where a partner doesn't think they're doing well, it's because the way they're doing well doesn't ultimately help their partner, establish any more safety or what they need. So best case scenario here, it's not a matter of who's right. It's really a matter of, do we have an agreement, or can we come to an agreement on our relationship that we're actually here to help each other out? So if I have concerns about your recovery, can we talk about those? Can we engage in those in a way that it's not the spirit of criticism? You don't have to take it that way. It's simply me saying, hey, it seems like you still really struggle with empathy. And I know that because when I talk about my emotions, you tell me what to think or what to do, which is not empathetic. If there's an agreement in the system that we're here to help each other, what I have to say to you about what I see, it's not necessarily, hey, this is gospel truth and you must do it. It's, you might want to look at this. One of my favorite concepts from Stan Tatkin is he'll say, you can't see your own teeth. In other words, you need another person or you need an aid to see yourself completely. And, at the best, I think that's what a connected relationship is really good at providing, is that I have someone who witnesses me more than anybody else. In some ways, I think our partners can know us better than ourselves because there's a whole aspect of us that they can see that we don't. So you might start with a conversation. Hey, can we pull together here? Does this really have to be a who's right, who's wrong? I'm willing to see that there's things going on in your recovery that are probably fantastic for you and you're feeling a lot of relief. Are you willing to concede that there's parts of your recovery that I'm really relying on and I need them to go a certain way if this relationship continues to be a good option for me? Can we help each other out there? That doesn't necessarily, seeing it differently, it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem as long as you guys can agree to be open to influence from one another.
Yeah, and I think it's fairly common that the betrayed partner and the recovering partner are not in the same place when they assess the recovering partner's recovery.
Yep.
The addict has known about the addiction all along. When he or she comes clean, there's usually a sense of relief, and then they're very aware of the work they're doing and trying to do. The betrayed partner just got run over by a truck. you know, going 100 miles an hour. It's an emotional truck, bam. And there's going to be, just dealing with that immediate crisis is going to take some time. And then starting to trust, I mean, you know, relationship trust has been shattered. How can I trust anything you've ever said or ever done? So the cheating partner has to earn this, and it's going to take a while. So even when the cheating partner maybe 6 months into recovery and hasn't relapsed and is telling the truth in all of his or her affairs, and you know, is really doing a great job, the betrayed partner is not there yet. um, you know, it's two roller coasters, and they're not the same roller coaster, and you know, one of them is behind the other one. It's just normal for you to not be in agreement. And I've had sponsees, and I'm sure you've had clients say, "Oh my God, why won't she or he believe that I'm really doing this?" You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And I'll usually say to that, you know, saying it once probably doesn't make up for the times where you were getting it wrong. This is a long-term process. Makes me think yesterday of a guy that I worked with, a really good example of this. A lot of the people who come into my office, a lot of the addicts who come in my office, they're coming with their arm twisted. My spouse said that there's a problem and they want me to get help. Um, I think that's a perfectly fine motivation to start therapy. It really doesn't get you very far, though. Um, so, you know, I've had this experience several times, and it was a really good example yesterday. This guy came again with something his spouse has been saying for a long, long time. And before, he and I have really been working on him being open to influence and how that relates to building trust. And I've been saying to him, you don't have to take what's coming from your spouse's lips as this is true, but you do have to show her that you'll, you know, give it honest consideration. You can't just think for 30 seconds and say, no, I don't agree. Like, you've actually got to work with it. So he came yesterday and he said, I want to work on, he said, I need to revisit my recovery plan. And we looked at some things. He said, oh, by the way, I need to work on family of origin things and things related to fantasy. And it was a really different tone for him. And I said, I'm guessing that's what your wife wants you to look at. And he said, yeah. I said, well, how do you feel about that? And he said, really, I probably haven't given those an honest look, and I'm open to doing that. So I outlined with him some ways that we might get at that. And he was actually excited in the end. He said, I don't think I would have ever thought to go here on my own. And I'm glad that I was open to that suggestion, because this, I can feel now that there's probably something there that could be helpful. And, you know, that partnership, it can take a while to kind of solidify, but you know, it's something that with a lot of clients I work on long term. You know, you don't have to take this as just criticism, or you don't have to take this as just you know, your spouse not being pleased with what you're doing. Your spouse might actually have a legitimate need or even a legitimate insight. Do you really want to pass something up that could be that valuable because, you know, for 2 seconds you felt anger or discomfort about them saying this?
yeah, and just to go back about to what you said about motivation, you know, at our Seeking Integrity Los Angeles Treatment Center, 90% of the clients we get are forced into residential treatment by their partner, or by, like, you know, if John is treating somebody and they're just not getting it, and he thinks, okay, let's send them to an inpatient facility for a couple of weeks, um, and they come in, and our first job is to break through the denial. um, you know, I'm only doing this because my wife wants me here, because my therapist threatened to fire me. That's why I went to inpatient treatment. My therapist threatened to fire me. You know, the therapist firing the client. It happens. And that was the only person I was even remotely honest with, not totally honest. And I just couldn't handle that. So I went to treatment. And they spent a bunch of time breaking down my denial so that I would be willing to do the things that, like John just talked about, looking at my family of origin and this and that, and you know, the underlying issues beyond, and also becoming accountable. I mean, that's a big resistance thing for addicts. I don't want six people knowing where I am all day every day. But you know, even if that's what I really need, you know, I don't want trackers on my phone. I don't want, you know, well, guess what? You know, if you want to stay sober, but we have to break through the denial, and that's the therapist's job, or the treatment center's job. But first and foremost is break through all of that denial, so that we can get to the issues and start doing something with them. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and being out of denial still, I don't think means that you see things the way your spouse does. And again, that's
right.
okay. 4 eyes are better than 2. 2 brains are better than 1. But yeah, I think that's a crucial step in tackling that problem. Is, do we have any problems with denial or defensiveness on this? Is this an open system or a closed system?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, when we talked about healthy coping mechanisms versus unhealthy, it's opening up the system,
Yep.
is always the healthy thing to do.
Yeah.
So we are out of time. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, John. We will be back in 2 weeks, right before Christmas. Woohoo! We're in the middle of Hanukkah, I think, if you're Jewish, or I don't know what all the other holidays are. But anything you want to take us out with, John?
Just thank you everybody for coming. Thanks for the great questions, and I'll be excited to see you guys next week or 2 weeks, the 22nd.
So, all right. See you later,
Yeah.
everybody.